So Hansi, there's a lot of talk about startups in Vienna. There's a lot of talk about topics, but let's start very early. I found out a lot of you studied business and a lot of other things, but what I didn't know, I couldn't find out is where you actually come from, where were you brought up, what was your childhood like, small little teaser inside.
You're really starting with that? Okay.
That's a 2-minute thing, or maybe a 5-minute thing.
Okay, good evening to everybody. Thanks for inviting me. It's a big honor to be here with you. Well, so let's start. I'm from Vienna. I'm an old man, and that's, by the way, the main reason why I love to work together with young people, because I feel much younger, and that's my main motivation being a business angel. I was grown up in Vienna. I went to a school called Höhere Technische Lehranstalt, no way secondary technical school or whatever, and then to the Wirtschaftsuniversität Wien. And it was quite nice at that time because there was no unemployment. It was very easy to find good jobs everywhere. We're talking about the years 75, 76, 77. So that's long ago, 40 years ago. Can you believe that?
Who was actually born by that time?
Great to see 4 or 5 people here. That's when I had my first job.
Anybody not sure if Hansi might be his dad? No, I'm not sure.
I have been too long away abroad in other countries. So.
That's the reason why you come back from Spain. Okay, so you started business or economics?
I don't know whether it still exists. I was studying Handelswissenschaften. Whatever this is
I think
today.
It's BWL today.
And it was in the former view, not the former, which may some know of you, in the 18th district, where there was this small park. I think I was one of the last students studying there. That was really wonderful. Very nice, small university, really cool. I haven't seen it very often, to be honest. And it was really cool, my studying. I loved it. I loved it very much because I had a lot of time. It was kind of easy at that time. People tell me that's more difficult today. Don't know whether this is true or not.
I think people always tell it's more difficult today. Anyway, I think it was what you make out of it. So after university, what do? You applied for dozens of jobs, or?
Well, the thing was, I've been talking about that just recently. I wasn't very sure what to do, so I put a Kleinanzeige in a newspaper in Korea saying. Young dynamic manager, WU, looks for a really cool challenge. And I got 220 companies, 220 letters from companies. Can you believe that? 220 companies sent me a letter and wanted to have me, or at least to interview me. I haven't even responded to all of them because that was very, very difficult at that time. You could only answer with a typewriting machine, not with a PC. We are talking about 77. And I applied for a job, quite strange, not for one of the big companies. I went to the far west of Austria, to Vorarlberg, and was working for the first 2 years of my career in a company which today you would say it's a startup company. Very small company with a great guy, an owner who was an inventor, and he was doing electronic steerings 7-8 years before the first PC was on the market. And that really, I think, is a reason why I still love startups, because I was working in a startup. We were doing electronic steerings for leather machines or dialing machines. You have to imagine that was in a time when there was a telephone with this Wählscheibe and no memory. And that guy invented the dialing machine, which was able to memorize 10 numbers. And that was a great thing. We sold it for very big money. And for the first 2 years of my life, and that's an important experience, and that's something which I always recommend to you young people, I was selling. I was a seller. I was selling all over Austria, Germany, Switzerland, these electronic steerings and these dialing machines. And it was an experience I really would not like to miss. Although after 2 years, when for several reasons, I came back to Vienna. I was applying for a job in a subsidiary of the Shell Group for marketing manager, because that was what I thought and where I'm good, and that's what I know to do. And I had a job interview, and at the end of the job interview, the CEO of the company and the personnel director of Shell told me, That's very complicated. I mean, they had a job interview with me, but already in the morning, they hired the marketing manager. They just did the job interview because there was an appointment, but they really would like to have me in the company, and their finance manager is going to retire in 4 months' time. Whether I could consider working together with him for 4 months and then being the finance manager of the company, and had nothing else to do at that time. I said, okay, why not? So let's try that. And this is one of these rare things in life happening, which changes your life. For me, it was really extremely important because I realized that numbers is my thing. I'm a numbers guy. I didn't know that before. I thought I'm a sales guy. I'm not bad in selling, but I'm a numbers guy. So that is what changed my life at that time. From that time almost for several years, I was working only in finance departments as a finance manager.
Coming back to the sales part, you said it's very important to have like sales experience in your view, which I probably could, with my current situation, can relate to very much. What is the biggest like experience that you want to share? What is important in selling to somebody who is, especially a lot of people in this room coming from a tech background, they're like product people, like product in terms of tech product. What would you like tell them? What is the most important takeout of
That's a huge topic. In general, I think in Austria, or maybe generally in Europe, we are bad sellers compared to the States. That's one of the main difference between Europe and the States. You may know that graphic, I've seen it several times, which is very typical, where you see in the States one product development person, one tech guy who is developing a new product, and it's more or less half finished, and there are 40 sales guys waiting and starting to sell that product. And with the revenues of what they are selling, they are finishing the development. And in Europe, on the other side, you have 40 people, 40 tech guys with a perfect product, but it's not 1000% perfect. And there's a half sales guy, and he doesn't really know what to sell. This is very typical for and that is what I think where we should improve in Europe and in Austria. It's so important not only to be good in what you're doing, in having a good product, you have to tell the people that you are good. You have to convince. Selling is nothing else than convincing other people. It's not just selling a product. Life is selling. Life is convincing. If you have an idea, you have to go out and convince other people of that idea. You have to convince your partner if you want to go on holidays on the beach and the partner wants to go to the mountains. You have to convince. That's also kind of selling. It's so important. And the most important part of selling is... Great. The most important part of selling is closing. It's not only about selling, it's about closing. And that's extremely important. That we really have... Whenever we sell something, whenever we want to convince somebody that we have a goal, what we want to achieve. And the goal we want to achieve is only achieved when it's closed. If some of you have already been looking for money for your startups, you may have experienced that sometimes they are interested investors, and sometimes you're sitting together and they say, wow, that's a cool company, I'm going to invest 50,000 or 100,000 or 500,000, whatever. Or you're sitting with the lawyer and you're negotiating. The only thing that counts is when the money is in the bank account, when it's closed. So there's nothing finished before it is closed. And that's a very, very important experience. And you get that when you're working as a seller. You experience the frustration when you go out there and you think you will come back and you will come home with a signed contract, but you have not been able to convince the buyer. And you feel this, you have this wonderful feeling if you go out there and you have sold something, you have a signature on the contract. And that's a very, very important experience. And at least, by the way, if I invest in a company, I only invest in teams. At least one in the team has to be a selling person.
Thanks for that insight. So you said you were a number person, and as you already have been working abroad, because as a Viennese person in Vorarlberg, you're probably quite abroad. I know Mark is in here, and he's from
more abroad than Spain.
Yeah. Probably. So you ended up in Spain. How did that come along?
Well, after having worked for 5 years in that as a finance manager in that Shell subsidiary, I thought it's time to change. And I was looking for another job as a manager. And I was looking for a job in an industry where they really pay well. And the clear decision was the pharmaceutical industry. So I really intentionally was searching for a job in the pharmaceutical industry, and applied for a job being a CFO of the subsidiary of a British pharmaceutical group in Vienna. I started in '85, I think, there. And only after a year or so, I was offered to be the CFO of Germany, and then of Central Europe, and then of Europe. And they always offered me jobs in other countries, and I never wanted to go away from Vienna, really. I thought, well, Vienna is really cool, and I want to live here, and I don't want to live anywhere else. And then I also thought, well, I'm now 40, which is quite late to go abroad. I was around 40, and I said, well, can I really imagine to stay here until 60 or 65, the next 20, 25 years, doing the same thing what I'm doing now? And the conclusion was no. So I told the people in my head office, after thinking where I would like to work, they could offer me a job in Spain. And they offered me a job in Spain. So in '92, I went to Spain and was running the Spanish operations for that pharmaceutical company, which was quite a big company, 800 people there. And we were very successful. That was how I came to Spain in 1992.
So was it CEO position, or was it COO? Was there another CEO, or was it already your CEO position, your first one?
That was my first CEO position, yes.
So you led all the 800 persons, was your full responsibility.
Yeah.
So later on you bought that. You made a management buyout.
Well, I didn't buy exactly that. I was working for an international pharmaceutical group. And again, I thought, hey, that's a really cool job. I had a very good salary. I was also paid as an expatriate. That is, if you live in another country, you get additional expenses paid, your housing and cars and everything else. It was a really cool job. I thought, wow, that's great. I'm really on the top level of my career. I can't expect anything else. Because I always said I will not go to the head office to UK and have a board seat there. That's not what I would like. Live in Spain for the next years, that's fine. On the other hand, it was also clear international companies send you abroad for 3 to 5 years, not for longer. Because they know you need around 1 year to settle there. In year 2 and 3, you start to be really productive. 4, maybe still, but the year 5 is already a year where your productivity is going down. So then they send you to another country. And when I was 3 years there, they started to discuss with me where I should go next, and they were thinking about United States or anything else. But suddenly our group, on a worldwide basis, was bought by another pharmaceutical group, by Glaxo. The new company was then called for several years Glaxo Wellcome, till it was merged with SmithKline Beecham. Now it's GSK, one of the biggest pharmaceutical groups in the world. And they bought my company. And that was kind of a very interesting experience for me, because I was very sure that in Spain, the Glaxo company in Spain, they also had a general manager, and I was sure I was much better than him. So in theory, I would be the much better candidate to run the newly merged company. But I mean, they were the buyers, So finally, it was after several weeks, it was very clear that I will have to look for other opportunities. But at the same time, I realized already before, our company had a big manufacturing plant in Madrid with around 400 people, and Glaxo also had a manufacturing plant in the north of Madrid. And they wouldn't need 2 manufacturing plants. That was very clear for me. But they just cannot close down a manufacturing plant. In '95, Madrid was Spain was in a similar situation like now. So they had an unemployment rate of 23-24%. And for a multinational company, it was practically impossible to close down a plant and to make 400 people unemployed. So and it had nothing to do with the money they paid to them. It was just politically not possible. And I realized that they had that problem, and I told them, I have a solution for your problem. You give that a manufacturing plant to me. I can run it as a pharmaceutical company. I will take over the 400 people. I will, for the next 3 years, manufacture the same products I have been manufacturing now for Glaxo Wellcome, because they will need that. And in these 3 years, I will change the company and the focus of the company and look for something else. That sounds quite easy now. It was 8 months of negotiating. But finally, I bought the company. And by the way, because I think it was published in Spain, so I can tell you, any of you ever have participated in an M&A seminar about valuation, I bought that company for €1. And that was a good deal for Glaxo, because it's always the question of the alternative. It was 30,000 square meters near the Madrid airport with 50,000 square meters of state-of-the-art pharmaceutical company worth around 35 million euros. But they had no idea what to do with it. So that was a cool deal. I had to take on board 2 Spanish partners, 2 of my Spanish directors, which I knew is going to be a huge problem, because I would have preferred to do it alone, but there was no way. They wanted to have Spanish people on board. And in '95 I started as a founder of my company, but I was starting with the company with 400 people.
Coming back to what you said right a second ago, is you said you'd prefer to do it alone. On the other side, beforehand you said, in a real startup, not 400 people starting up, you prefer teams. So what is the difference on that side?
Well, I prefer to take my own decisions always. That was like that my whole life. I mean, if I really can choose my partners, and I can pick my partners after evaluating them and thinking they will be a great fit, then it's cool. Then I also would like to have a team. But in that situation, 1995, it was very clear for me that we are going to have problems, because there was a different mindset. It's all about the mindset. The mindset has to be a similar mindset. If you work together, whether it's in a founder team or whether it's a business angel together with founders, check your mindset. It's not about your best friend and you're having a beer with him in the evening. You may have different mindset, but you spend great time together having a beer. It's about a similar mindset. What are your values? Where do you want to go? How do you see problems? How do you tackle problems? If you think a similar way, then that's a good team partner. If not, better not have him as a teammate or her as a teammate.
So we know you sold that company at some stage, but how did that in between go? Did they leave the company, or did they stay on board until the end? Or how did you work with those people that you actually were not so inclined to work with?
We needed the first year to decide who is going to run the company. And the first year, we split it up the company in three parts, and we were 3 general managers. And then I started to convince them that this is probably not the best way to run the company. We took on board a coach who helped us, and after 1 year, we finally decided that I'm going to run that company. And they are in the kind of board, and I have to deal with them on a board level, which was quite difficult for some time. But I mean, on the other hand, I knew that this is such a great opportunity that I have to go for it, and I have to just to pay that expenses for that. So I dedicated, I would say, every week between 5 and 10 hours just to talk to them and to explain them, and the rest of the time I was doing my job.
So how did you position your company, like you found or taking over pharmaceutical company, because you had this contract for 3 years, but of course you needed to develop your own product or to develop your own strategy.
I would say we had 2 different strategies. One was, and that was very interesting. You have to consider that the pharmaceutical industry, compared to any other industry, there's one big difference. Wherever you launch a new product, if let's say after 1 year, 2 years, you realize that the product is not fulfilling your expectations, you just take it from the market. In a pharmaceutical industry, that's not possible. If you have a drug and you have patients for the drug, you just cannot take that drug from the market. You have to continue doing all the work for the drug, have it in the market, even if the sales expectations are not met at all. Even instead of 1 million drugs, you only sell 500 drugs. There are 500 patients out there. So you have to go out and sell these 500 drugs. The international pharmaceutical companies do not even want to manufacture these drugs. They hate them. They don't like them. All pharmaceutical companies do, I would say, it's not the 80-20 rules, it's the 95-5 rules. They do 95% of their sales with 3 or 4 drugs and 5% with 50 or 60 or 80 drugs they have accumulated in their history. And as they don't want to manufacture them, they also do not want to sell them normally because it's their drug. Because they cannot find, it is very difficult for them to find somebody who is going to manufacture these drugs for them because they require very high manufacturing standards. And normally a private company is not in a position to have these high manufacturing standards. And they would not give these drugs to the competition. But when I bought a multinational manufacturing plant, state of the art, we were perfectly positioned to manufacture for many multinational pharmaceutical companies exactly these products at quite nice prices. So for 2 or 3 years, we are really growing like hell, like 50-60% per year, which for a manufacturing company is very difficult, and it gives you a huge working capital problem because you have to finance all that. And at the same time, I knew that, the big money is not in manufacturing. The big money is in the drug, in selling the drug and having your own drug. So in the next 3 or 4 years, I founded 12 different businesses. I think we had 2 generic companies, 3 OTC companies, 1 company focused on women healthcare. We bought 40% of a manufacturing plant in Ukraine. We founded a commercial company in Miami. So we were quite busy. And that way we were partly financing our growth because we founded companies. And in the pharmaceutical industry, it's kind of, you have a company, you're selling something, you have a structure, and there's always a pharmaceutical company needing sales. And the sales multiple is always, or the value is always sales times 3, more or less. And we founded the company, 2 years later we sold them for 3 times sales. We did that several times until we needed more money in the company to finance the growth. So I took in a private equity company, taking over 40% of the company and financing the growth, and also which was also had also nice cash out for the founders. And from that moment on, which was 1999, together with the private equity fund, I had majority, so it was much easier for me to run the company.
Slightly coming back to that spinning of 12 companies, it's a topic that I hear quite a lot in the last 6 months, is the topic of big companies working together with the startup scenes, incubation, acceleration, co-working, creativity space. How do you see that development? Because that is kind of a thing that a lot of bigger companies actually need some vehicles to change their business, change their strategy. How do you see that also as a business angel? This is of course for you interesting as a potential merger or a potential buyer, basically not a merger, potential buyer.
Well, I would say they slowly, really extremely slowly are seeing and realizing the needs they will have in the future, or they already have. From my point of view, it's much too slow for them. Some of them have been faster in the past. But digitalization, we are just at the very beginning of that. From my point of view, if somebody asked me, I would say we are at 5%. It's going to change our world in the next 5 and 10 years, a way which we cannot even imagine. I'm very much convinced of that. So even very big companies, the so-called blue chip companies, being on stock exchange with a wonderful business model, they can be bankrupt within a year, can be really extremely fast. So, I mean, it's kind of an emergency that they are really opening themselves now for startups. The question is whether to do it the right way. I mean, we have very good examples because media houses have started to do that already 10 or 12 years ago. And some of the big German media houses have done a quite good job, as we know, like Springer, Burda, Holzbrink. They all have 50, 60, 70% of their sales already in digital companies. Others have been even much faster, like the Norwegian company Schibsted. The Norwegian company Schibsted, a media house, by the way, in 1999 in the board meeting, took the decision to get out of print. In 2004, they sold their last print company. So they are only digital, and it's a media house. That's interesting. But when the German media houses, for example, in 2003, 2004, started to invest in digital companies, practically all of them committed the same mistake. They bought digital companies and tried to integrate them in their structure. And practically all of these digital companies died. Because a startup, with the startup spirit, with the creativity you have there, with the different working style, that's all these ingredients which we need for a startup, which we need for changing the world, which we need for improving business models or being disruptive. You cannot do that in a structure of a big company. And they needed some time to learn that. It was a very costly way to learn that. Springer, for example, has learned that. I can talk now from Rantastic. You all know that, mainly most of you will know that Springer acquired 50% of Rantastic 2 years ago. Springer doesn't interfere at all. There's one person responsible for the relationship between Springer and Rantastic. And that person mainly asks, hey, do you need something from us? Where can we help you? You need money? You need, let's say, connection to one of the companies we have. You need somebody from our network. And obviously, once a year, there's a discussion about the budget for the new year, but nothing else. They have learned that this is the best way to treat with digital companies, with startup companies. And my fear is that many of all these big companies now going into startups, not all of them will be intelligent enough to do it that way.
I recently had the opportunity to talk with a lot of CIOs of big Austrian companies, and let's say like that, their approach was rather like that. They're like, how can we get the innovation in and then accumulate them in and then integrate them completely, and that's going to work. And I've said like, no, it's not going to be like that. But you also came now from the startup background. In '99, you had the VC. 99 was it?
Private equity, that's similar but not the same.
And then of course for VC there is always the exit strategy, of course, very important. So at some stage you sold the company in 2003?
We sold it in different stages. I mean, it was very clear that it's not the manufacturing plant, that's the additional businesses we have created where the value is. So we sold our two major businesses in 2003, which was one of the generic businesses and the women healthcare business for a total of around 50 million euros. And the last pharmaceutical company I sold was just 3 years ago. I still had it there. Was a company just having the license for 5 pharmaceutical products, and I sold it mainly 3 years ago.
So it was not a bulk buy of one buyer.
No.
It was like
and after having the first exit, I still was an owner of 33% of the manufacturing plant together with my Spanish partners, which was an interesting experience because when I sold that companies, I said, okay, I'm out. And I would have sold also the manufacturing plant, but my partners wanted to continue. So one of them took over the plant, and I was just assisting to board meetings, nothing else. And after 2 or 3 years, in 2006, I came to an agreement with them, and we did a kind of friendship deal. So I gave them my 33%. We were more or less interchanging shares in companies. So I got out of the company, and that freed me the way to go back to Vienna. So in 2007, that was the first time when I moved to Vienna. But at that time, I already had I think, another 12 or 15 businesses in Spain. So I was renting a flat in Madrid, and from Vienna, in the beginning, once a week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks per month, I went to Spain and to Madrid because it was much more exciting there.
Do you still have any ventures in Madrid or not?
Yes, I have a participation in a hairdresser chain.
It's definitely the right business for you, I can say.
And I call it some cadavers. I mean, I have, I think, 5 or 6 companies with losses brought forward, which I think someday I can use them for something or whatever. So every 3-4 months I have to go 2 or 3 days to Madrid in order to take care of my things. But I have no major business now there.
I've also heard you had a disco at some stage.
Yes, I had a disco. After I had my exit in 2003, I thought, and this is maybe a mistake many successful founders are doing, they think everything is possible, you know. I thought, okay, in the pharmaceutical industry, whenever I thought about the strategy, how to build up a company, and to whom I will sell that company, and then selling the company, and then closing the deal, it always worked out. And I did it many times. I did it around, I don't know, 8 or 9 or 12 times. I don't remember exactly. And I thought this is always the case. So I had partners from Buenos Aires who had a wonderful business in Buenos Aires, which was a chain called Locos por el Fútbol, which means crazy for football, which is a huge restaurant, really huge restaurant, where you can watch football and eat at the same time. And, well, looking at screens, but not at one screen, at 150 screens. So we are talking about 1,500 square meter and 1,000 or 1,500 people being there. And I've been to Buenos Aires, and they say and it was really great business. I've seen it there. And they said they want to go now from Argentina and Uruguay. They want to open their first restaurant and then a chain of restaurants in Spain. And they're looking for a local partner. So I was the local partner. And we did the 50-50 joint venture. And in fact, the idea was to open 10 of these huge restaurants in Spain within 15 months or so. It was quite a big investment. And, well, nevertheless, I said, okay, let's see whether the first one is going to work. And it did never work in Spain. That was a really cool learning for me, because I thought that will be a real exit, a real success. I was really convinced that it's going to be a success. It had all ingredients of a success. And in the very beginning, I didn't understand at all what's not working, apart from the fact that I'm not a specialist in gastronomy, but I had the professional people from Buenos Aires coming over. Well, there were several reasons. The main reason was that people in Argentina are more crazy for football than in Spain, and that male and female 50-50 are equally crazy, and that's not the case. And that's not the case in Spain. In Spain, it's the men going to watch football and not the women. So that's a different business, and you have to adapt the business concept. So I tried for 4 years, because I hate to lose. So I tried for 4 years to adapt the concept. We changed it, I think, 15 times. At one time, we had one of the biggest discotheques in Madrid, because, I mean, the whole place was really cool for having a hip-hop disco. I had a hip-hop disco. With 1,000 people on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night there. And that was working quite well after we solved the problems with the night mafia at the beginning. Well, but at the end, we found a business model which was working quite well, which was in 2008. It was a really cool event location, and we had huge events there. And with the financial crisis of 2008, within 3 or 4 weeks, the companies canceled 80% of all events I had for the rest of the year. And that was the moment where I said, no, I'm not going through that. And I closed it down. And closed down a place like that means you lose everything, because it was a rented place. We invested 3 or 4 million euros just in the interior, and you get back 20,000 euros if you sell that, because then it's an emergency sale, and all the accumulated losses. So that was a real big loss. And I mean, I've booked it under experience.
So after your hairdressers and discos, and I don't even want to know what else.
But I
you
had
did.
my own disco. Come
Yeah,
on.
like it's, it's a bit bigger than the usual. I want to own my own bar that everybody dreams of when he's 16 to 19.
Yeah, we had 125 employees in
So
that
it's
place.
a
So
bit,
it was
slightly bigger than the average. I want to own a little bar in Vienna or something like that. So you already said you moved back to Vienna. In the beginning, coming back to Madrid a lot of time, and then you at some stage you started to invest in startups. How did that come along?
That was the case when more or less in 2009, 2010, I really could see a horizon to my Spanish businesses because I was closing it down or selling it or whatever. And I thought, okay, in 2011, 2012, I will end up in Vienna, and what I'm going to do there, I had no idea. And I thought, well, just not doing anything, only mountain biking, which is a passion I have, that may be not enough. And I think more by accident, I invested in 2 startup companies. One was Buzu, the language learning company, founded by an Austrian and a Swiss guy based in Madrid. And the other one was Renesim, an online jeweler based in Munich. The people in Madrid I knew from Madrid. I knew them for 2 years, and they were always explaining me and telling me what they are doing, and they were in need of money. So I said, okay, I invest money in that company, and let's see what happens. And the online business, by the way, was the only business I invested just on a business plan. There was nothing. But I really liked the 2 founders. I think I like the story behind, I like the 2 founders. And I said, okay, I'm going to invest, I think it was 300,000 euros to finance 1 year, and then let's see whether we have a proof of concept and get more money and we see or not. And not even before seeing first results, I think after 3 or 4 months working together with them, I realized that this is what I always wanted to do. I loved it. I really loved it. I loved it to work together with young people, not being responsible for the operational part. I mean, I had enough of that. I was working when I was running my own company. I came home at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the night, and I got up at 7 o'clock, and I was working on Saturdays, whatever. I had enough from that. But I really love to be an entrepreneur. I love to have new, innovative business models. And I'm also very much convinced that you only can run one business operationally. There's no way that you can run 2 businesses. But as a business angel, I can participate in several different businesses. So I realized that I love that, and then it was kind of an easy step. I saw other opportunities in Vienna. I was looking whether there's a startup scene in Vienna. There was a very small one, Start Europe, which is now Pioneers. I was at the first Startup Live weekend, end of 2010, and it costed me really a lot of time to find out where they are and what they are doing. And I met 50 people there, 20 working for Startup Live and 30 people from the startup scene. And that was more or less the startup scene of Vienna, end of 2010. But I met the fantastic guys at that event, by the way. And I met Andy Charles and Jürgen Furian from Startup Live and several others already at that time. So I clearly said, wow, that's cool what they are doing. I'm going to help them. That's the reason. Then I started to help Startup Live and Pioneers. I'm also an investor in Pioneers. And I realized, hey, I have to do more on that because I cannot get enough. And for a period of 2.5 years, on an average basis, I invested every 5 weeks in a startup company until I had 27 or 28. So the last year, or the last 1.5 years, I was slowing down my pace.
But you recently founded another one, or?
Yeah, last week. Not founded. I invested last week. Yeah, but I couldn't avoid that because the fit was just great. So I had to do it.
On the other hand, you're working for the AAIA, the Austrian Angels Investors Association, or if I've got it right now.
Austrian Angel Investors Association, AAIA. I'm not working for the AAIA. I founded the AAIA together with Selma Brodanovic and Steffi Pingitzer because we thought it's time to do something on the other part, you know. I mean, we have a startup scene here. We have Pioneers and Startup Live, and we have Sector 5, and we have whatever to do with that, but we have not enough money and not enough business angels. And to be a business angel is not like, because many people still do not understand what a business angel does. And it's very important to understand the role of a business angel compared to a financial investor. A financial investor puts in money, just like that. And when I read in the newspapers or wherever that we need more millionaires putting money into startups, I mean, that's partly true, but that had nothing to do with what a business angel does. Because a business angel very often doesn't even invest money. I do normally. But apart from money, he invests his network, he's a coach for the founders, he helps in strategic and important decisions, he tries to avoid founder clashes. So there's a lot of things he can do. He brings experience and know-how to the startup and therefore increasing the likelihood of success. That's extremely important. I personally think that the likelihood of success of a startup with a good business angel, apart from the money, is 10 times or 20 times higher than without. Why? I mean, it's really easy to answer that question, if you allow me. I mean, startup founders are typically between 25 and 35. They are passionate, they have a great idea, they are willing to work 24/7 for very little money. They have all ingredients, if they have, to be successful. But there's one thing they do not have and they cannot have, this is experience. How could they? So that is what the business angel brings and has to bring into the startup. And this is what really helps the startup.
So this is something that probably you can answer is, so how do you see the development of the angels? Because we always talk about a startup ecosystem or the startups in Vienna, but how do you see the development of the angels? There's a couple of angels that are quite, have quite some outside view that are in the press and everything else, but the AAIA, whatever your association, sorry, the Angel Association has grown quite a lot. How do you see that working along, the experience of the angels, and in the long run, like how many angels are going to be there in Vienna?
Well, on one hand, I would say there are some kind of hidden angels. They always have been. People who have been working as managers, entrepreneurs, and successful, and for whatever reason, they're helping a young company in growing and developing the company. We don't even know about them. Typically not in the what we call the startup scene. Somewhere maybe outside Vienna, in the countryside, or wherever, in small places. Then we have these people who, in the dot-com bubble, lost money. Or in the dot-com bubble, or whenever, you know, all these people who have a lot of money are very often approached from others who need money. That's normal. And I personally know at least 5 or 10 people who have a lot of money, who are successful managers or entrepreneurs, and who have lost a lot of money in startups already. Because they had a friend, and there was a son of the friend, and that friend pitched to them an idea, and every young person pitching an idea, there's something special, and you may get the emotions, and you feel enthusiastic about it, and then you say, okay, that's really great, and that guy is really going to change the world, and I put in 100, 150, or 200,000 euros, and whatever, and the normal result of that is 6 months or 12 months later, the money is away, and the money is lost, and the person who has invested the money has no idea why, and he will never invest again, or at least not the next 10 years. Why is this the case? Because business angel, like any other job, you have to learn how to do that. And the more you do it, and the more you interchange with other people, the better you are in that. To be a business angel is not, hey, I'm a successful entrepreneur and I have money and I'm a business angel. There are rules you have to follow. There's know-how you have to build up to be successful. I mean, out of 100 startups I see, there may be 3 or 4 or 5, but it's worth thinking to invest money. To be honest, we are talking about that. There's a huge amount of ideas. And maybe it's not mainly the idea, because a business idea, if you really reflect on it and think about it, you can improve your business idea. And let's say out of these 100, there may be 50 business ideas worth following it. But these 50 business ideas, they only, I'm talking in rough numbers, 5 adequate teams and 45 not adequate teams. Not the right people to run a company. I mean, we do not have enough good people to run companies. That's my main learning. So for me, for example, the major part in my filter, in my decision before I invest in a startup is the people. It's not a business project. Any business model, any new business model can be adapted. But you cannot adapt the people. You cannot change the people. You have to invest into the right people, into the right team. And this is something which in the AAIA, and the Angel Investors Association, I try to communicate. I try to transmit this experience and this know-how to the people, how important it is and how important it is to select the right startups out of all these hundreds and thousands of startup ideas that are there. And we have now 140 members, and these are people having money, and they are willing to invest, and they are, let's say, always better prepared to invest in startup companies, and many of them already have invested. I suggest them to invest at the beginning, let's say, as co-investors, just putting in 50,000 euros together with a more experienced angel. The next time a little bit higher ticket, and maybe after 2, 3, or 4 investments, they can do their own investment as a lead investor. So after they have learned what to do, what is important in a contract, what is important, how to evaluate a team, what has to be there, what is not that important. This is kind of know-how.
Okay, so we're going to have 140 angels pretty soon who are all leads, so we're going to have like 600 angels hopefully very soon that can invest as co-investors as well. If I give you now, I think you've got roughly 30 startups that you're having in your portfolio. If I give you now 30 euros for each €1 per company, and you're free, you have no company left, what would Hansi Hansmann look for in terms of startup and team, like areas? You always say the team, but is there like areas you're really fond of at the moment, or where you really would look for? Or that you think out there is a future trend that shouldn't be missed, and also what kind of personalities are you looking for in your teams when you're starting now, doing your portfolio and investing again every month another startup?
Well, as I said before, the most important thing for me is the team. So I think about the team in 3 different levels. The first and most important one for me is whether I like the people. Just simple like that, and whether I have the feeling they also like me. I never would invest in people I don't like, even if they are the best business people in the world. I would not invest in them, because I know that from experience that we have to go through crises, that there will be a lot of problems, and it's easy to, let's say, to enjoy the nice times and to have a beer together. It's not that easy if we have a real crisis and to go through the crisis. It's better to do that with people you like. And together with like is that mindset thing I described before. So I really try to find out whether we have more or less a common mindset, or at least whether I understand their mindset, if they have a common mindset, and whether it can cope with my mindset. I really do that consciously when I talk to them. The second thing is, after mindset and like, is, do I see at least in one person in the team this entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial energy which is necessary to run a startup? This willingness to, whatever happens, go through it, to stand up whenever you fall down, to stand up again. Is there at least one person who is a leader? That's very important. The third thing, that's the easiest one, is more or less, do they cover more or less the necessary professional capabilities? So is there, if it's a tech company, is there a good CTO, a good technical person? Is there a good selling person, somebody who is able to sell? And there's at least one person who understands numbers. And I'm not talking about bookkeeping. I say to understand numbers. That's something extremely important for me. I mean, I expect from my founders, I would expect from my founders, I've never done it, if I wake them up at 3 o'clock in the morning and ask them how much money do you have on your bank account, that they know it. Or how much traffic did you have last week? I mean, there are some KPIs that are so important in a startup that you really have to be aware of them and live with them all the time. And if you're not able, if you have to, no, let me have a look. I'm not talking about cents and euros or whatever. I'm saying 20,000 or 50,000 or something like that. If you have to look and see how much is it, what is at the end of the spreadsheet, bullshit. Forget about it. You have to live that, and that's so important. So that's the 3 important criteria for the people. Then, I mean, I have investments in totally different sectors. I have 6 or 7 in the healthcare sector because this is where I'm closest from my background. I always say this is where I more or less understand what they are doing compared to the others. But what I want to see is a kind of mega trend. So it's always good to invest in a company which is at least in 1, better in 2, better in 3 mega trends. What are mega trends today? I mean, mobile. There's a mobile mega trend. I mean, a company which is only fixed on website and doesn't even consider, say, well, one day we will have to do an app for that. I mean, come on. I mean, if you think about the numbers, if you think how many people will have smartphones in the next years and the growth rate to that, everybody has to be mobile. Everything is mobile. Much more will happen mobile than on the PC or than on a normal website. Health is obviously a mega trend, this self-tracking thing, and tracking your food and your movement and control yourself better and provide yourself with a good lifestyle and everything else. Gaming is a mega trend. Not gaming itself, I wouldn't invest in gaming startups, something I don't like. But I mean, gaming as a part of something else. So these are the trends I'm looking for. Then obviously I'm always looking whether the business model is scalable. This is extremely important. You know what scalable means? That means that if you increase sales, that expenses would not increase in the same percentage. That's very easy, no? But that's so easy, and many people do not understand it. And one thing is, I personally have to understand the model, the problem they are solving. And I'm asking that question when I talk to founders, what is the problem you are solving? You cannot imagine how many founders are not able to answer that question. That's the simplest question ever. That's the main question of a pitch. A pitch is very easy. You have to explain what is the problem you're solving and why you are better in solving the problem than others. What's your USP? And how many people do this problem have? So that's the market size. More or less, that's the pitch. You can abstract every business model to these short things. And I would like to understand the problem. That's very important for me. So I do my own numbers. I don't need a business plan to see the numbers. A business plan has always 2 parts. A business plan is describing the market and your approach to the market and how you are replacing and how you are changing the world and everything else. That's good to read because that gives me a possibility to really understand what they are doing. And then there is a numbers part. And I want to see that numbers part, and I want to see the Excel sheet, not the PDF, and I want to go into the formulas. And I want that one of the founders has done it, because then I understand them much better, understand how they have done their numbers. Are they thinking straightforward, or are they kind of coming at very complicated ways to their solution? It's not about the outcome whether in 2 years or 3 years we do 10 million or 50 million or 500 million. I mean, that's easy. I've been doing that when I was selling my own companies, you know. I know that perfectly. That's not the point. It's just to see the Excel sheet helps me much better to understand how the founders have structured their business idea and how they are thinking. That's the important things for me when evaluating a startup.
Okay, and so as you're now heading the Pioneers Investment Committee, as far as I know,
The Speed Invest.
Speed Invest Investment Committee of Pioneers 2, you're still gonna look for those things, or what's your role gonna be in this? It's basically the same as now, identifying which team to invest in with the committee.
Well, I mean, Speed Invest is a kind of a different story. When I started to invest in Austria in 2010 and 2011 started Speed Invest 1, we practically were the only players in the market. So that was very easy for us to find the best startups because there was nobody else investing. It was quite simple. And from time to time, we came to the same startup. And after knowing each other better, Oliver Holle and myself, we decided in those cases we do a co-investment. So instead of the startup negotiating with one of us and then with the other, we just did a co-investment. One of our co-investments, for example, was Spock, a successful co-investment which we did together. After around 1.5 years ago, when I had close to, 25, 30 startups, I said, I'm not going to invest more. But I was in Pioneers, and I saw the Pioneers Challenge. I saw these 1,000 startups, and this year it's 1,600 startups applying for the Pioneers Challenge. 1,600 startups applied for the challenge. And the quality of the documentation is much better than 3 years ago. I can really see improvement everywhere. I thought it's such a pity. I would like to invest more, and it's such a pity that we do not invest in that. So my idea was to set up a fund for pioneers 1.5 years ago. And then I came together with Oliver Holle, who told me that Speed Invest 1, everything is invested. They are setting up a second fund. And then it was very clear, let's do it together. It will be easier for both of us to do the fundraising for a important fund, and we did it. The first closing was 58 million, which is by far the biggest early stage fund in Central and Eastern Europe. And there is a cooperation with Pioneers. Pioneers, and I'm in Western Pioneers. Pioneers is dealing with all the micro tickets. So it's kind of an accelerator which is run by Pioneers, but the money comes from Speed Invest. And I mean, mainly, we needed a role for me in that. I'm not working as an investment manager. I mean, that's not my role to work as an investment manager there. And the role which we defined was, okay, because the people I was convincing in the fundraising were asking me, hey, and what are you doing there? Why should I give money there? And you convince me, what are you doing there? So we found that role that I'm heading the investment committee, which is cool because from every month or 2 months I see all these startups the investment managers bring up, which I already have screened, and it's just taking a decision, we invest or we do not invest.
So it's easier life for you now. So
Yeah.
you can keep on with your 30 startups that you don't want to sell to me for €1 each. It's a pity. I would love to buy the Hansmen Group. So we are finally at the Q&A session, and I'd like to ask you to put out your question, right, Christoph? I'm going to repeat it so we've got it on tape, and then Hansi can answer it. So first hand was up, Christoph.
Yeah, my question is in regard to, we heard about ecosystems, yeah, the startup scene, the angel investors. Is there a need for a third part where you put together the experienced managers around 35, 40 years to be eager to work for a startup? Because what I heard, much more startups would have opportunity to be successful if you have a counterpart which gives them more guidance, the team lead, yeah, the guy who really goes the hard way.
So the question was, the question was basically, isn't the ecosystem missing a part where like middle-aged managers, like 35 plus, have their role that they can then like impact on the startup scene as well?
On one hand, you have to motivate these 35, 40-year-old managers to do that. They will need something. Startups cannot pay them. So if there is a need for that, and I can imagine there's a need for that, it's still not part of the ecosystem, to answer your question. You have to give them equity. That's the only way. But something a little bit special to your question, which I've experienced, all these young startup founders who have been growing up with PCs and with mobile phone, I mean, they are just much better in that, like older people. That's normal. So when they are sitting behind their PC or behind their development desk, thinking about how to improve the world, they are really good in B2C business, because B2C business is, okay, what do I have to do in online marketing or whatever, and how do I fill my funnel, and how do I optimize my conversion rate, and so at the end I have that and that percentage of B2C users. And nobody from the older generation can compete with them. But there are many startup companies with B2B models. And a B2B business model means you need a person who is going out and selling. And for whatever reason, when a startup company, when founders come together and do that, they think they are able to do that. They are not. Because you need to be good, you need to be prepared, you need to have experience to do that. And this is where I really see need for people with experience and a possibility to bring them into startups. I have done that for 3 or 4 of my startup companies just recently in the last year. I was looking not for investors. I mean, I'm always looking for investors because I'm taking care of the funding rounds of all my companies. My founders normally don't care about money. Not only when I invest, also in the next rounds, because I know that they are not focusing on their business when they're looking for money. So I try to cover that. But I try to find people who really fit to the company. And just recently I found several people, 60, 65 years old managers, having some money with huge sales experience. And I was putting them exactly in those companies who were in need of B2B sales experience. And this seems to work out really great.
Okay.
Does this answer more or less your question? I mean, if you ask me to put up an ecosystem for 35 to 40-year-old managers, I would say...
Okay, thanks for the question. Any other questions? I think it was a bit faster.
Could you please tell us something about the decision-making process in Speed Invest 2? If the company is invited for a pitch, who is the committee you're pitching, and who are the people, and how many rounds are there until you make your decision?
The question was about the structure of the deal process, basically, at Speed Invest 2.
No real idea about the detail, but in fact, there are several investment managers in Speed Invest, and they are specialized in certain areas. There's one specialized in fintech, another one specialized in all companies that could have a market in the United States, because they have an office in the States. So if there's a certain startup within Speed Invest, to decide who will take that on board, because who is closest to that, and he will have a closer look at the business model. He will have a closer look at the people and meet the people. And if that person comes to the conclusion that it is worth to go to a next round, then there's a next round. If this person says, well, no, forget about it, then it stays with that person and the decision has been taken. In the next round, all the investment managers coming together, I mean, they work together, so I don't know whether they do it weekly or 2 weekly or whatever, coming together and take closer looks. And if they take closer look and say, okay, that's worth to take a closer look, then they start with a small due diligence, looking, okay, what is exactly the market, who is the competitor, is it really scalable, how much money is required, not only now, how much money is required in the second or third stage, because that's also very, very important. And if they think then that's okay, to come to a positive conclusion, then it goes to the investment committee.
You are part of the investment committee.
Yeah. So Hans is part of the investment committee. Jan, you were next.
Is it sometimes annoying that so many people want your money?
Is it some? There was a question if it's sometimes annoying that so much people want Hans's money.
Well, to be honest, it's not only my money. Over the last 2 years, I had at least 3 times startup founders were offering me up to 10% of their company, not for money, just for being in the company and helping them. So that is a good feeling, you know. It's not just the money, and it's not annoying, because I really can have a lot of understanding for founders. I know how hard it is to come only to a good business idea, to find a team, to then take the necessary decisions, how to go on, to find some money from friends and family, to sit together, and instead of just working somewhere in an office and getting paid 3,000 or 4,000 euros, working for practically nothing on an idea. And then they have an idea, and then they have to talk to 10, 20, 30, 40 people. So they have to pitch, and I have huge understanding for them. And I mean, for example, on Pioneers, the next 3 days or 2 days, on Thursday and Friday, I'm sure I will listen to 100 pitches. And I'm there and I listen to the pitches and I tell everybody what I think about it. I mean, I think I feel that as my obligation to do so. Even if I think that's never going to be a success, forget about it. I mean, I'm a little bit more straightforward than I was 3 or 4 years ago with pitches. I don't want them to waste my time, because I think if somebody's on the Pioneers Festival and knows there's a high probability that he will meet investors, so please prepare your 30-second or 60-second or 90-second pitch. Have it prepared. And don't come to me and say me, hey, can I tell you my story, and then starting with something which has nothing to do. Then I normally interrupt and say, you had 30 seconds and 10 seconds have already passed. Or I also say, coming to the point, I don't think that is big enough, the market is big enough to have a business idea on that. I mean, I try to give feedback which is helpful. But I normally listen to all these pitches, and it's not annoying, it's work. It's work for me because I have to concentrate, and it doesn't make any sense if I just stand there and say something. No, I really concentrate and focus on that and try to be in the shoes of the founder and try to imagine what that person is explaining to me and give my own feedback to that.
Okay, thanks. Another question? Jesus, not a lot of questions here tonight. I think everybody's eager. Oh, I think there's one more down here.
So, as a software developer, a lot of people come to me trying to have me be their technical co-founder, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for those startup people, for them to come to me with actual money instead of just equity possibilities.
So there is a question as a software developer, a lot of people coming to ask, being the CTO, like doing the development stuff and having advice on that, and especially on payment stuff. And yeah,
I mean, that's the whole thing of a startup. You don't pay high salaries, you give away equity. That's the way it works. I mean, I cannot really imagine a startup spending money on market salaries in a very early stage. There's just no way. Because then you are just a salaried person, which means if after 3 months or 6 months or 9 months you have lost the interest, you just go away. But if you have 20% or whatever of the company, you don't just go away, because you think, hey, that's 20%, that's mine. So I'm really part of that company. I mean, it's extremely important that the main people of the companies are founders. Not only because the company doesn't have money enough to pay market salaries, it's also to have them in the equity of the company, because that means that they believe in the company. I mean, I would never hire you with that approach. Never, ever.
okay. Questions? In the back, very back.
So you've been talking about successful teams.
What is a successful team?
I've not been talking about successful team. I have been talking about teams who fit together from their mindset. Because when I invest, they are still not successful. Because if they are successful, they don't need me. So I don't really understand the question.
Put it the other way around. When you say the same mindset, I don't know, like there is to me it's not really clear what makes me see that I have to make the same mindset in order to do it.
Yeah, I mean, simple things like, for example, there's a person who thinks, well, it could be nice to have the experience of working 1 year in a startup. I will learn a lot because it's very intensive, and I know I will earn a little money, but after that year, I will have been learning a lot, and then I don't know what I do. And you have another co-founder who says, well, I really burn for that idea, and I want to make that a success. I don't know whether it takes 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years, but as long as there's any possibility, I will work for it. I mean, these two mindsets just do not fit together. So forget about that other person. You have to, as co-founders, you have to find people who fit together and have more or less the same goals and also similar values about things. What is important to you, what is not so important to you. I mean, it also can be a real problem if you have if you are, let's say, living alone and have all the time in the world, and your co-founder has a baby at home, that's a potential conflict, no doubt about that, because you cannot dedicate the same hours.
Okay, so it's kind of a thing about vision and about like the common goal. There was a question over here, and then there is one last question. The ideal mindset.
I don't think there's an ideal mindset. It should be a similar mindset among the founders. And the thing which has to be there, I mean, I love, for example, if the business idea is the solution of a problem one of the founders have. That's always cool. If I mean, the best example is My Sugar. You know, My Sugar, 2 of the 4 founders are type 1 diabetes people. And they really wanted a solution for their own problem. How to track everything they are doing with their smartphone to be able to handle their diabetes a better way. So they found a solution to their own problem. I mean, that's a great motivation and a great mindset for that. And I mean, in My Sugar, I think it's half of the people suffering diabetes. They really try to find, when they look for developers, they look for developers having diabetes. Yeah, because I mean, it's also good for the product. They can make a better product because it's always the solution of the product. Or even Rantastic. I mean, Rantastic, look at Florian Gschwandner. He is a guy who really loves doing sport. He does exercise, he's running, he's jogging, he does weights, whatever. And he wants to track what he's doing. He always wanted that, and he's doing that with Rantastic. It's also kind of solving his own problem. So solving your own problem is a very, very good motivation. And what also has to do with the mindset is what I mentioned before. Well, I'm not sure whether I mentioned it. No, I did not. Money. Money should not be the main motivation, never. Not for the founders and not for the business angel, by the way. I mean, if you are an investor, I think, okay, money is your motivation. You are a finance investor and say, okay, I invest money in that company because, okay, I can multiply my investment by 5 or I can lose everything, and with certain probabilities. Okay, that's a fair approach. This is not my approach. My approach is I want to do something new, innovative, in the ideal case disruptive, with young, passionate people. And it's a game. And I use my money for it. And I want to win that game, obviously. But I think if I do something together with really cool, intelligent people that I like and that like me, and we are also a little bit lucky, then at the end of the day, we will be successful. Whether this is positive cash flow, a little bit earlier, a little bit later, or whether somebody buys out for much more than we have invested, that's both cool. But you should not, I think, you should not found a company to become a millionaire. It's fair to have that wish, you know, to become rich, that's fair. But it should not be your main motivation. Your main motivation should be to solve a problem you have seen or you suffer, you've seen with your friends or whatever, or where you think, hey, many people are suffering from that problem. I want to solve it. And if you then put all that into a business model, together with your founders having a similar approach or a similar mindset, and you all want a similar solution to that problem and using similar values in what you are doing. Mindset means also I mean, there are people who want to go home at 6 o'clock in the evening, even in startups, and others who don't care working all night through. This has to be talked before. I mean, if you talk transparently before, by the way, that's also very important learning. Whatever you do, talk at the very beginning, honestly and transparently, and come straight to the point. That's the best thing you can do. Among the founders, also with your investor or as a business angel. I do it. If I see a problem, I really go straight forward to it and talk about it. So that's the mindset thing.
Last question. Would Hansi invest in the discotheque again, considering there's the perfect team and the perfect location? Everything is fine. It only needs to be started.
Yeah, I mean, considering that I stopped investing, I mean, not really, because I invested in a discotheque before I started to invest as a business angel in startups. And believe me, for an experienced person, having seen practically everything in life, in its professional life, there's nothing better you can do than being a business angel. And that's what I'm doing now. I don't think I can do something better in my life from a professional point of view. I'm really happy with what I'm doing. So I don't think I would invest in a discotheque because you don't need a business angel for a discotheque.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Hansi, for being with us. Thank you for answering the question. I don't know how long you're going to be here tonight. I hope you're going to join us. There's a lot of people who want to talk to you, surely. I've got a last question. What's the best mountain bike brand? That's it.
Specialized S-words.
Oh, God. You're so wrong. Well, that's all right. Oh, that's fine. Please give a warm hand of applause to Hansi Hansmann.